I was just 8 years old when my parents left me. I remember it like it was yesterday. They took me to my grandparents' house and said they would be back soon, but they never came back. I didn't understand why they had left me, and I cried for days. My grandparents took me in and raised me as their own. They were loving and kind, and they did their best to make me feel loved and secure. They never talked about my parents or why they had left me. I learned not to ask questions, but curiosity never left me. Growing up, I often wondered why my parents had left me. I felt like I was missing a part of myself, like there was a void that couldn't be filled. But my grandparents were always there for me, and they taught me to be strong and independent. As I got older, I began to make peace with the fact that my parents were gone. I focused on my studies and interests, and I tried not to dwell on the past. But then, one day, my sister found me. I was sitting in my living room reading a book when I heard a knock on the door. I got up and opened the door to find a young woman standing there. At first, I didn't recognize her. But then she said, "Hi, big brother," and I realized who she was. I was in shock. I hadn't seen her in 22 years, and I had no idea how she had found me. She explained that she had been looking for me for years and had finally found me through social media. She told me about the life she had lived and how she had always wondered what had happened to me. Then she thanked me for saving her life. I was confused. I had no idea what she meant. She then began to tell me the aftermath of when I was abandoned. She told me about the abuse and neglect she had suffered at the hands of our parents. She told me about the times when they had hit her and locked her in her room for days on end. She said that when I was around, our parents would focus their attention on me instead of her. They would take out their anger and frustration on me, but they would ignore her or mistreat her when I wasn't around. She said that knowing I was there made her feel less alone and gave her hope that things might get better one day. But then I had left, and she felt like she had lost her lifeline. She was scared and alone, and she didn't know what to do. But then she remembered something I had said to her before our parents left with me. I had told her that we were strong, that we could survive anything as long as we had each other. She said that those words had given her strength and that she had clung to them in her darkest moments. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face. I was overcome with emotion. I couldn't believe that my parents had done this to her. I couldn't believe that they had abandoned me and then treated her so horribly. Then she told me something that shocked me even more. She said that one night when our parents were particularly abusive, I taught her how to dial the emergency number and call for help. She said that I had taken her to the phone, shown her how to press the buttons, and told her to call the police if things ever got really bad. I had told her that the police would come and take her away from our parents and that everything would be okay. I was stunned. I had no memory of doing this. I must have been only 6 or 7 years old myself at the time, but my sister said that I had done it and that it had saved her life. She told me that one night when our parents were fighting and throwing things, she remembered what I had told her and had dialed the emergency number. She said that she had been too scared to speak to the operator, but that the police had shown up anyway. She said that the police had seen the bruises on her arms and had asked her what had happened. She had told them about the abuse and neglect she had suffered at the hands of our parents. The police had taken her away that night, and she had never seen our parents again. She told me that she had spent a few years in foster care, but that eventually she had gotten adopted as they weren't able to contact any relatives. They had raised her with love and kindness, and she had grown up to be the wonderful woman she is now. As she spoke, I felt a mix of emotions. I was proud of myself for having the presence of mind to teach her how to call for help. I was grateful that she had remembered what I had taught her and had been able to get the help she needed. But I was also angry that our parents had put us in this situation in the first place. My sister noticed the anger on my face and gently touched my arm. "I know you're angry," she said, "but it's not your fault. It's not anyone's fault but theirs." I nodded with tears welling up in my eyes. I had been only 8 years old when our parents left us, and my sister was only 6. I remember feeling scared and confused, not understanding where our parents had gone. That day, when I was playing in the backyard, I fell and hit my head on a rock. I was bleeding badly and I needed to go to the hospital, but there was no one there to take me. My sister had been too young to know what to do, and our grandparents lived too far away to be of any help. I faintly remember lying on the ground, feeling the blood seeping out of my head and crying for our parents to come and help us, but they never came. It was only after several hours had passed that our parents arrived and took me to the hospital. The doctors told me that if I had arrived any later, I might not have made it. I was lucky to be alive, but the emotional scars from that incident stayed with me for a long time. After that, they left me with my grandparents and never came back. I was too young to realize what had happened. As my sister spoke, I realized that she had gone through her share of pain and trauma. She had been too young to understand what was happening when our parents left us, but she had suffered in her way. I remember being so scared, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't know where you were, and I didn't know if you were okay. I felt like I was all alone in the world. Tears streamed down her face, and I reached out to hug her. We held each other tightly, and I felt a sense of connection with her that I had not felt in a long time. She continued to speak, her voice thick with emotion. She told me how lucky we were to have each other and how much she had missed me. She also spoke about how much danger we could have been in if I hadn't taught her how to call for help. As she spoke, I realized that she was right. We had truly dodged a bullet. If it weren't for my presence of mind and her bravery, things could have turned out very differently for both of us. Despite feeling proud of myself for what I had done, I was still angry with our parents. I couldn't believe that they had left us alone and vulnerable, especially knowing how young we were at the time. But my sister urged me not to dwell on the past and to focus on the present. She reminded me that we had each other now, and that was all that mattered. As we sat there holding each other and reflecting on our shared experiences, I realized that my sister was right. We were incredibly lucky to have found each other again after so many years apart. Update 1. It has been a few weeks since I reconnected with my younger sister, and I can say that our bond has grown stronger each day. We have spent a lot of time catching up on all the years that we missed, sharing our dreams and aspirations, and getting to know each other as individuals. One day, my sister surprised me by taking me to meet her adoptive parents. I was a little nervous at first, but they welcomed me with open arms, and I could see how much they loved my sister. My grandparents had passed away a few years ago, and my sister had never had a chance to meet them. It was something that had always saddened me, knowing that she had missed out on the love and warmth that my grandparents had given me during my childhood. My sister's adoptive parents were kind and welcoming, and I could see how happy they were to have her in their lives. They told me stories about her childhood, and I could see how much they loved and cared for her. It was a beautiful moment, and I felt grateful to be a part of it. It was a feeling of warmth and connection that I had not felt in a long time, and it filled me with a sense of hope and happiness for our future together. The parents are worse than a-holes. I would be insulting the actual a-holes if I call OP's parents a-holes. Why have kids if you can't take care of them? Just why? They could have given them up for adoption at birth. It is so saddening to know that OP had to teach his sister how to call the emergency helpline. That too because of his parents' abusive behavior. No child deserves to go through that. You cannot leave children alone at home unattended. OP got lucky that they even decided to take him to the hospital and not just leave him there. It's great that his sister got adopted and he grew up with his grandparents. Next story. Long story short, my father is in prison and will most likely be in there for life. Over the last 23 years, he has gotten into relationships with multiple women, some at the same time. The problem is that the type of women that typically go after prisoners is, how shall I say, delusional. They always try to force themselves into our lives as if they are my new mom. They also believe that my father will get out of prison and sue the state for millions. But after 23 years, I've given up on that idea for him. My father has now, in my good opinion, jumped the gun and actually married one. She is apparently an old childhood girlfriend that he cheated on my mom with back in the day. My dad has a long track record of cheating on my mom. Yeah, fun. He keeps pushing me to meet up with her and get to know her. I used to entertain him and talk to the girls, but this time I have zero interest in doing so, as I have a pregnant wife and I don't want some random person in my family's life just because of the stepmother label. The whole situation makes my skin crawl. This woman moved out of her house a few states away and moved in with my grandma to be closer to my dad. And now they are married. This is where I had to say something to my dad. This woman has been running my father's Facebook for him, and now she's messaging my wife under the guise of my dad, asking why she blocked the wife's Facebook account and why I don't talk to his wife. I think that it's freaking insane, like batshit crazy. She also texts me randomly, letting me know that my dad sent me an important email to read. Usually the emails are just him going, "Woe is me," and nagging me to meet his new wife. I have never once, I repeat, once talked to or replied to this woman's messages and texts. I don't feel the need to even get to know her because with my dad's track record, she will be gone in a year or two, or she will go crazy. I'm 31 years old and it feels super weird saying this, but she isn't anyone important to me and she isn't my mom. I barely even talk to my own dad, nonetheless his partners. Now with the baby on the way, caveman's brain has kicked into protection mode, and it makes my skin crawl thinking of some random woman being involved in my kid's life while my father is still locked up. She may be a nice woman, and she might actually be nice, but I don't care. Am I the a-hole for telling my dad that I don't want anything to do with this woman? I told him that if he were to get out of prison, we could potentially work things out and introduce ourselves, but until he is free, I want nothing to do with his romantic partners. NTA. I wouldn't have any interest in getting to know this person either. You have your own life and family to prioritize and protect. Her relationship with your dad is none of your business unless you want it to be, and you don't. You get to choose who to let into your life, and you're, rightfully from the sound of it, deciding that this person isn't a healthy person for you to interact with. Good for you. NTA. He is living a life in prison, which greatly limits his ability to function in society, including with his own family. You are now a man with a family of your own, and you have every right to lock out the craziness of your dad and his prison girlfriends and wives in order to protect your own family from the madness. He is your father, but that doesn't give him any rights to visit his tumultuous life on you. Tell him that you will not allow his partners into your lives, as they have no place in it. Her marriage to him does not mean she is part of your family. Next story. I, 20, female, started my current job about a month ago. Yesterday, I came in and spent all day in the back preparing inventory and only came out front to relieve my coworker, Nina, 35, female, for her lunch break. When I showed up, she was on a phone call with her son, 9, male, and ended up clocking out and leaving to go pick him up. She brought him back around 30 minutes before close and stayed up at the register with him and our other co-worker, Alice, 22, female. I continued my tasks in the back room until yet another co-worker appeared, Tom, 24, male, who told me that someone who bought a recliner came in to pick it up 15 minutes before close. This stressed me out a bit, but it was worse when I ended up in the other back room and realized I was going to have to move this thing by myself. I'm not terribly weak, and the lady who was picking up the furniture was following me step by step and trying to make conversation while I, a relatively petite woman, was trying to move a 60-plus pounds recliner up 2 different ramps. I managed to get it up the first one, then stopped to readjust the chair on the roller. While I was stopped, Nina's son jumped into the chair. This is where I guess I upset her. I said, "Hey, buddy, can you get out of there?" Just as Nina came up and told him sternly to get out of the chair. He got out but continued to try and play with it until she pulled him back. I started rolling it up the ramp, having to stop halfway because I felt the chair slipping off the roller. And Nina's son appeared again at the bottom of the ramp trying to help push the chair. I was becoming more stressed and anxious and very scared that this kid was going to be seriously hurt. I tried to ask him to back up and stop touching the chair, and Nina looked up and called him back over. Tom, who was watching from the register with Alice, asked if I needed any help, and I said, "I just need someone to keep the kid away from the chair." I finished getting the chair to the back, and Tom came out to help me load it, and that was that. This morning, I showed up to work thinking things were going to be pretty standard, but ended up being pulled aside by my manager, 36 female, before I could even clock in. She brought in Nina and the assistant manager and said we needed to talk about how I spoke to Nina's child yesterday and how I apparently snapped at him. I didn't get written up or anything, probably because we have a rule in place prohibiting employees from bringing their children to the store, especially into employee-only areas. But the issue wasn't really talked out or resolved. I was just chastised and talked over any time I tried to explain myself. It was a real emotional reverse from how good I'd woken up today. Nina isn't speaking to me. My manager is pretty neutral, but everything feels very tense now, and I'm just counting down the hours until Nina leaves early. I don't feel like I did anything wrong, but am I the a-hole here? Edit. Thank you to everyone for your responses, feedback, insight. To those of you telling me to go to HR or corporate, I don't think that would do much good aside from putting me in bad standing with my coworkers and manager. My manager has been here over 10 years and allegedly does other sketchy stuff and still hasn't been let go. And I don't want to poke that bear. I'll be leaving this job anyway at Christmas because I have some personal things going on just after the holidays and will be unavailable to work for a week. And I don't know, as a new employee, I won't be approved for that much time off. I'm just going to keep my head down and finish the next 8 weeks of work and start putting in apps to new places in early December. NTA, the kid is old enough to know better than to play in a chair someone is moving. He could have gotten seriously hurt. Your coworker is mad at herself and needed a scapegoat. Don't take this incident too seriously. You weren't the one at fault. NTA, you were trying to do your job and all evidence, policy, actual safety, and your nerves points to it being problematic that her son was back there with you and messing around. I do agree with others that this might be a good learning experience in terms of asking for help, or at least speaking up about not feeling like you can handle a task alone before taking it on next time. Even without the kid in the mix, this could have gone wrong, and simply mentioning that you need a hand to get something done is absolutely okay and won't make you look bad at your job. NTA, you're leaving anyway, so I would just write to the manager and include HR in the email, and just say something just to follow up on the conversation we had today. Once again, I want to apologize in case my tone of voice came off as hard when talking to Nina's son. My intention was never to come off as snapping at him. I just really needed her son to not be standing there so that he wouldn't end up getting hurt if the chaos or anything else fell. I would have felt terrible if anything were to have fallen on him or if anything else would have happened to put his safety at risk. And just leave it at that. That way, they can't come back later and try to blame it on you or say that you weren't being safe. And if they get mad, it doesn't matter. You're leaving soon anyways. Stay tuned for more stories from Our Girl Relationships.